Red Bull has brought 2 new Silverstone parts, and 4 rival teams have reportedly demanded an FIA check before those parts can turn into Red Bull's next weapon. That is not normal upgrade noise. That is a paddock alarm. Because one team complaining can sound like politics. 2 teams can sound like pressure. But 4 teams pushing for the FIA to look at the same Red Bull idea means the rest of the grid may have seen something they do not understand, cannot copy, and do not want Verstappen to use at full speed. And the scariest part is this. The source confirms the controversy, but it does not reveal the names of the 4 teams. It does not identify the 2 parts in full technical detail. It does not give drawings, measurements, or the exact FIA complaint. So the mystery is still alive. But the fear is already real. Silverstone is the perfect place for this to explode. Fast corners. Heavy tire load. Brutal balance demands. A track where a tiny aerodynamic advantage can become a massive difference in confidence, stability, and lap time. If Red Bull's new parts make the car calmer through the fastest sections, the whole paddock will see it. If they help Verstappen attack earlier, carry more speed, or protect the tires better, the rivals will feel it. And if the FIA checks the parts and clears them, then the message to the grid could be terrifying. Red Bull did not just bring something advanced. Red Bull brought something advanced enough to scare 4 teams, and maybe legal enough to keep. That is the nightmare scenario. Because once an idea is checked and allowed, it stops being a rumor. It becomes a development path. And if Red Bull has found a path the others missed, Silverstone may not be the place where this controversy ends. It may be the place where Red Bull's next advantage begins. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this first block matters, you have to separate the headline from the real danger. The headline is simple. Red Bull brought 2 new parts to Silverstone, and 4 teams reportedly want the FIA to check them. But the real danger is much deeper. Because in Formula 1, teams do not react this strongly to normal upgrades. They see new parts every weekend. They photograph floors. They study wings. They zoom in on brake ducts, side pods, engine covers, cooling exits, and every tiny surface around the car. That is just the daily life of the paddock. But this is different. For teams asking for a check means the concern has moved beyond curiosity. It means the paddock may believe Red Bull has found something that could change how the car behaves in a way others did not expect. And that is where the tension begins. Because the source does not confirm the names of the 4 teams. It does not reveal the exact identity of the 2 parts. It does not give the full technical complaint. So we cannot pretend the details are public when they are not. But the reaction itself is the story. For teams do not raise their hands unless they believe the matter is worth attention. And at Silverstone, attention becomes pressure very quickly. This is one of the most unforgiving circuits in Formula 1. It is not a place where a weak car can hide behind one clever trick. The corners are fast. The loads are heavy. The tires are punished. The driver needs trust through every high-speed change of direction. So if Red Bull has brought parts that help the car feel calmer, sharper, or more consistent there, rivals will notice. They may not understand the full mechanism immediately, but they will see the result. A car that carries more speed through a fast corner looks different. It turns with less hesitation. It needs fewer corrections. It protects momentum. It gives the driver the confidence to attack earlier than everyone else. And at Silverstone, confidence is not just a feeling. It is lap time. That is why the 4-team reaction matters so much. The concern may not be about what the parts look like in the garage. It may be about what those parts could allow the car to do on track. Because a Formula 1 part does not have to look dramatic to be powerful. Sometimes the most dangerous upgrades are the ones casual fans barely notice. A small surface. A narrow opening. A slight shape change. A piece that seems harmless until it changes the airflow around the rest of the car. That is how Formula 1 performance often works. The car is a chain. Air reaches one part, then another, then another. One tiny change at the front can affect the middle of the car. One small change around the bodywork can affect the rear. One hidden detail can help the floor work more consistently. And when the floor works better, the driver suddenly feels more grip without seeing the reason. That is why rivals get nervous. They are not only asking, what is that part? They are asking, what does it unlock? That word matters. Unlock. Because the part itself may only be the visible clue. The real advantage may be how it connects with the rest of the Red Bull. And connected advantages are the hardest to fight. If Red Bull has simply created a faster wing, rivals can study it. If Red Bull has simply created a different bodywork shape, rivals can copy the idea. But if Red Bull has created a system where 2 new parts work with the car's existing philosophy to create stability, efficiency, or tire control, then copying becomes far more difficult. You cannot copy one piece of a lock and expect to open the door. You need the whole key. That may be what rivals fear. Not that Red Bull has brought 2 pieces of carbon fiber, but that Red Bull has brought 2 pieces of a bigger answer. And Silverstone is the perfect place to test whether that answer is real. Because this track asks the car for everything at once. It needs aerodynamic grip through the fast corners. It needs balance when the forces build. It needs the tires to survive long, loaded sections. It needs the driver to trust the rear of the car when there is no time to hesitate. If one upgrade improves only one of those areas, that is useful. But if an upgrade connects several of them, that can become a breakthrough. That is why the FIA check is so important. The governing body is not just being asked to inspect 2 physical parts. It may be asked to decide whether Red Bull's interpretation of the rules opens a path that other teams did not see. And that decision can shape more than one weekend. If the FIA clears the parts, Red Bull may gain confidence to keep developing the idea. If the FIA questions the parts, Red Bull may have to defend, adjust, or even step away from something it believed could improve the car. If the FIA gives an unclear answer, the controversy may grow instead of disappear. That is the pressure point. And it puts Red Bull in a very uncomfortable position. The team wants the parts to work. But if they work too obviously, the questions get louder. The team wants the parts to stay secret. But an FIA check can bring attention to exactly the area rivals want to understand. The team wants Silverstone to be about performance. But 4 teams have made it about legality, interpretation, and trust. That is a difficult balance. Because Formula 1 is not only a race of cars. It is a race of ideas. Every top team is trying to read the regulations more cleverly than the rest. Every designer is searching for a gray area that can become a performance gain. Every rival is watching for the moment clever becomes questionable. That is the line Red Bull may be standing near. Not necessarily over it. The source does not prove that. But near enough for 4 teams to ask the FIA to look. And being near the line is where the greatest Formula 1 stories are born. Because the fastest ideas are rarely comfortable. They make rivals uneasy. They force regulators to clarify. They make fans argue. They make every team ask the same question. Why did we not think of that? And if the answer is because Red Bull has found something genuinely advanced, then the rest of the grid has a problem. A very serious problem. Because once a clever idea is declared legal, it can become the next development direction. The first question is, can they run it? The second question is, can we copy it? And the third question is, how much time have we already lost? That is why the rival teams want clarity early. They do not want to wait until Red Bull has collected data, refined the setup, and proved the parts through race pace. They do not want the idea to become normal before the legality is tested. They want the line drawn now, before momentum starts. Because momentum is what makes Red Bull dangerous. A single upgrade can become belief. Belief can become direction. Direction can become performance. And performance, in Verstappen's hands, can become control. That is the part the rest of the grid understands perfectly. Red Bull does not need a miracle if Verstappen is given a car he can trust. He does not need everything to be perfect. He needs a platform that gives him confidence through the corners that matter. He needs a car that responds when he asks. He needs a package that allows him to attack instead of compensate. If these 2 parts help create that feeling, even slightly, the whole Silverstone weekend changes. Not just for Red Bull. For everyone chasing them. Because a Red Bull that is struggling can be contained. A Red Bull that has found direction becomes dangerous again. And a Red Bull that finds direction with parts the FIA clears after 4 teams demanded a check, that becomes something even more powerful. It becomes validated. It tells the paddock that the rival saw the threat, raised the alarm, and still could not stop it. That is the nightmare scenario for every team watching. But there is another side. If the FIA finds a problem, the story flips instantly. Then the 2 advanced parts become a warning sign. The 4 teams look alert rather than nervous. Red Bull looks exposed instead of clever. And Silverstone becomes the place where a possible breakthrough turned into a public complication. That is why the first phase of this story is so tense. Nothing has fully landed yet. The parts are not publicly identified in the source. The teams are not named. The exact complaint is not detailed. But the pressure is already real. And pressure is often what reveals the truth. Because once the car runs, every observer will start connecting clues. If the Red Bull looks more stable, people will ask if the parts are the reason. If Verstappen can attack the fast sections harder, people will ask if the parts gave him confidence. If the tires behave better, people will ask whether the upgrade has changed the load on the car. If the car shows no obvious gain, people will ask whether the controversy was bigger than the performance. Either way, the parts will be judged. By the FIA. By the rivals. By the stopwatch. And by Silverstone itself. That is what makes this opening block so important. This is not just a story about Red Bull adding performance. It is a story about whether Red Bull has found an idea so advanced that the rest of the paddock wants the sports referee to step in before the advantage becomes real. And the most dangerous thing for the rivals is not that the FIA checks the parts. The most dangerous thing is that the FIA checks them and lets Red Bull keep going. The next layer is where Red Bull's Silverstone mystery becomes a wider Formula One problem. Because once 4 teams demand an FIA check, the story is no longer just about whether Red Bull has built 2 clever parts. It becomes about whether those 2 parts could force every other team to rethink what is possible. That is the part most people miss. In Formula One, a breakthrough rarely announces itself as a breakthrough. It usually starts as a small detail. A part that looks slightly different. A shape that seems unusual. A section of the car that rivals keep photographing. A team that suddenly covers an area more carefully than before. A driver who sounds just a little more confident after a run. Then the lap time arrives. And suddenly, everyone realizes the small detail was not small at all. That is why the 4-team reaction is so important. They may not simply be worried about one race weekend. They may be worried about a development direction. Because if Red Bull's 2 Silverstone parts are legal, useful, and connected to the car's wider concept, then the rest of the grid faces a nightmare. They cannot just say, "We will copy that tomorrow." Formula One does not work like that. A copied part only works if the rest of the car can support it. A clever shape on one car may do nothing on another. A floor idea may depend on the side pod shape. A bodywork change may depend on how the rear of the car handles airflow. A cooling solution may only make sense if the whole package is built around it. That is why Red Bull's rivals may be so nervous. They are not only asking whether the parts are legal. They are asking whether Red Bull has found something they cannot easily copy. And that is far more dangerous. Because a legal idea that everyone can copy is annoying. A legal idea that only Red Bull can fully use is terrifying. At Silverstone, that difference can become obvious very quickly. If the parts help Red Bull in a way that is deeply connected to the rest of the car, the advantage may not look like one dramatic jump. It may appear as a smoother car through the fast corners. A cleaner balance. Less correction from the driver. More confidence under load. Tires that stay in the window longer. A lap that looks calm instead of desperate. That kind of gain is hard to attack. Because it does not come from one moment. It comes from the whole car working better. And when a whole car starts working better, rivals have a much harder problem. They cannot point to one area and say, "That is the whole secret." They have to understand the system. That is why the FIA check matters so much. For the rival teams, the check is not only about stopping something illegal. It may also be about forcing the first layer of explanation. Where is the sensitive area? What is the governing body looking at? What kind of interpretation is Red Bull using? Is this a one-off part, or the beginning of a bigger philosophy? Those questions are valuable even if the parts are cleared. Because in Formula One, knowledge is currency. A rival may not need the full design to learn something. Sometimes it only needs to know where the trick is hiding. Then the photographs become more focused. The questions become sharper. The design office starts testing ideas in that direction. That is the hidden danger for Red Bull. Winning the legality argument may still expose the path. And exposing the path can shrink the advantage over time. So Red Bull is trying to walk an extremely narrow line. It wants the FIA to be satisfied. It wants the rivals to remain confused. It wants the car to gain performance. And it wants the story to stay under control. That is almost impossible when 4 teams are already pushing for scrutiny. Because once multiple rivals are involved, the atmosphere changes. The paddock begins to treat the upgrade like a case file. Every run becomes evidence. Every camera angle becomes important. Every comment from the team becomes something to decode. Even silence becomes suspicious. If Red Bull says very little, people ask what they are hiding. If Red Bull says too much, rivals may learn. If Red Bull looks relaxed, people wonder whether it already knows the parts are safe. If Red Bull looks cautious, people wonder whether there is a problem. That is the impossible public game of Formula One. And it can affect the private work too. Inside the garage, the engineers still have to do the normal job. They have to run the program. They have to compare data. They have to decide whether the new parts are delivering what simulation promised. They have to listen to driver feedback and connect it to the numbers.